Yeah, like it's health and safety, or if it's like learning environment upgrades, if they're underbuilt, overbuilt, energy efficiency. So basically, with the state support, any of those local initiatives directly, state funding, good point. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a fascinating question about press.
I want to welcome everyone. The legal voters of the town of Norwich, Vermont are hereby notified and warned to meet in Tracy Hall, Norwich, Vermont at 7 p.m. on Monday, March 6, 2023, to transact business not requiring a vote by Australian ballot. Voting for town officers and for all articles of the warning will be by Australian ballot, and the polls will open tomorrow, Tuesday, March 7th, 2023, and they'll be open from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Peter Orner. I'm the interim moderator. Honored to be in this position tonight. It's a long tradition. There's been moderators in Vermont since 1749, which I learned studying about being a moderator. I want to thank John Carroll for all his guidance and generosity, a longtime moderator, and also for letting me borrow his gavel for tonight, which in Kenya, where this comes from, has other uses as well. So we are going to begin. Article 1, 2, and 3 are not articles that we discuss because they're articles that are you address tomorrow. So we're going to start with Article 3, which is hear and act on the reports of the officers of the town and town school district. So we're going to start tonight. I believe it's alternating years. We're going to start with the town school district. And I'm going to ask Thomas Candon to come up after I read the Articles 4, 5, and 6. So Article 4, to authorize the Board of School Directors to borrow money by issuance of bonds or notes not in excess of anticipated revenues for the next fiscal year in accordance with the provisions of 16 VSA Section 562.9. Article 5, shall the voters of Norwich School District determine and fix the salaries of the school board members in the sum of $500 each per year for a total of $2,500 in accordance with the provisions of 16 VSA 562.5. And then Article 6, shall the voters of the Norwich Town School District approve the school board to expend $7,243,970, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing 2023-24 fiscal year. It is estimated that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in education spending of $22,958 per equalized pupil. This includes the current proposed resident assessment articles for 7th through 12th grade. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 6.55% higher than spending for the current year. Thomas?
Thank you, Peter. I just wanted to take a minute first to introduce our board and some of your administrators before we get going, before I turn it over to my colleague Neil Odell here. But this is your Norwich School Board. First, closest to me is Neil Odell, Garrett Palm next to him, and Lisa Christie, and Lily Tryman. And then a couple of our administrators here. We've got Robin Steiner, our Assistant Superintendent, Sean Gagne, our Principal, Katie, our School Counselor, Greg, our Coordinator of Student Services. I see Becky French is here today too. So we have some teachers, some former teachers. Thanks for coming out tonight, everyone. And then I'd like to also introduce our Business Administrator, Jamie Teague here. And a little add-on for Ms. Teague that she was just named the New Hampshire Business Administrator of the Year last week. Well deserved. She's really earned it each of the last 7 years, but she was finally recognized this year, although she really has done an amazing job for us ever since she's joined. So thanks to Jamie for that. And I think I just saw Bonnie walk in too. Hi, Bonnie. On behalf of the school district, I just wanted to reach out and say thanks from all of us, from me personally, because it's been wonderful working with you. And it's just been a true pleasure. You've always been there with every answer to every question we've had for you. Good luck in your retirement, and thanks for all you've done. Really appreciate it. And with those introductions, I'll turn it over to Neil. I'll take it back with Articles 7 and 8, but Neil's going to walk us through the budget.
Thank you very much, Tom. Chico, can we switch over to the... Voila. All right, thanks very much. So the first thing that I want to address tonight, for those of you that were anticipating or have heard about the impending tax rate increase in Norwich, that is not with this budget, okay? So you can all breathe a sigh of relief, not this year, it's coming next year. We'll get into that a little bit later. All right, breathe deep. We can get into it then for this year. So we're going to start at the end with the numbers that I think everybody's probably most interested in. The homestead property tax rate forecasted right now to be $1.9913, up 7 cents or 3.83%. For those of you that pay based on income sensitivity, the number is 2.61%, almost a 7% decrease. Now you may be asking yourself, why is the property tax rate going up and the income sensitivity rate's going down? You can thank the common level of appraisal for that, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. All right. At the base level, right, the homestead property tax rate is based on 6 items. First is the MCS budget, so the amount of money that we spend to serve our students in grades pre-K through 6 at the Marion Cross School. Second is the Dresden budget. So this is the amount of money necessary to run the Richmond Middle School and the Hanover High School. Over on the other side of the river, students in grades 7 through 12. Third is the percentage split of Norwich and Hanover students in Dresden. This percentage split determines the amount of the Dresden budget that is assessed to Norwich. Fourth is equalized pupils. Equalized pupils is calculated by the Vermont Agency of Education and is intended to recognize differing costs for different categories of students. Fifth is the yield numbers. We'll cover the yield numbers a little bit later this evening in the presentation, but for now you should know that they are determined by the legislature and are in part based on the health of Vermont's education fund. Last is the common level of appraisal, which is a means of adjusting property values. This ratio is determined by comparing the grand list value to the sale price for all of the arm's length transactions in town over the prior 3-year period. So let's take a look at each of these items in a little bit more detail. First, the Marion Cross budget. As our moderator noted, $7,246,470, up $625,290 or 9.44%. Some notable items in the MCS budget. First up is that we don't currently yet have a negotiated settlement with our teachers. We're currently in the fact-finding phase of negotiations and expect the fact-finders reports to land sometime later this week. Any settlement there will cover both this year and the prior year. Also, negotiations continue for our support staff. Yet, despite a lack of settlement in both areas, salaries are up almost $280,000 in this budget due to staff progression on the salary grid, as well as a noteworthy health insurance increase of 12.6%, the result of statewide health care bargaining. Now, a few things that aren't in the budget this year. The septic system is a separate warrant article. We'll cover that later on this evening. And playground updates are also a separate article. We'll talk about those as well. So there are 2 items in the budget that can have significant impact, and those are enrollment and staffing. So enrollment is important because equalized pupil counts have a large impact on the education property tax, and staffing is important because, as you saw before, salaries and benefits are one of the largest contributing factors to the school district's budget. So this year actually turns out that our enrollment projections for this year were almost spot on. So we forecasted we'd have 337 students this year, came in at 336 back on October 1, which is the reporting date. Next year, we're anticipating a slight increase up to 341 students. I do want to note here, though, and we're missing you're missing a little bit of the legend there on the bottom of the screen. But we've seen enrollment trend up over the last few years, in part because of our pre-K program. This year, we actually doubled the capacity in that program, up from 18 students to now about 35 in our pre-K program. Next is staffing. So when it comes to staffing, we use the term, if you haven't heard of it, a full-time equivalent, or FTE. So a 1.0 FTE is a full-time employee, 0.5 FTE would be a half-time employee. So for next year, we're planning a very slight reduction in the total number of FTEs in the school from 54 down to 53.8. So despite the noted increase, thanks for trying, Chico, appreciate it. Despite the noted increase in the enrollment, we're trying to do the best we can with staffing to make sure that we're using those monies wisely. Given our current estimates, we anticipate class sizes and configuration to look like this for next year. So 2 sections in each of our pre-K, kindergarten, and 3rd grades, 3 sections in all of the other grades. I want to stress right now, this is an estimation based on what we think class numbers are going to look like. Things typically shift a little bit over the summertime, so check back in with Principal Ganya at the end of the summer. He'll have a better sense of what these actually look like. Going a little bit too quickly here. So moving on to expenditures, and what you see from this view of the budget is just how much money is actually devoted to regular education and special education. Those 2 items together make up about 65% of the Marion Cross budget. So with that view, I want to dive in a little bit on expenditures for next year. The biggest factors driving the budget increase this year at the very top, those bars you see for regular education, up about 10.4%. The increase is the result, as we had mentioned previously, increases to salary, payroll, taxes, and benefits, as well as that 12.6% increase in health insurance. The 3rd category down, which is special education costs, those are up for similar reasons, so salaries, benefits, payroll, taxes, as well as an increase due to a special education out-of-district placement. Operation of maintenance and plant is up, mostly as the result of higher fuel costs and electricity rates. And finally, transportation up as well, also the result of increased costs for fuel. Moving on to revenues. Revenues this year are up just over $94,000, or 6.48%. This year, we had a little bit of tuition income, just over $14,000, which shows us that tiny little blip at the top of the graph there. Other local revenue sources are up just over $12,000. The biggest change is the revenue received in our census block grant for special education. So if you remember from last year, the state has moved from a reimbursement model to a block grant model for special education. This year, that amount for Marion Cross was up by just over $160,000. That covers the Marion Cross budget. The second item is the Dresden budget. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here. The Dresden budget was presented at the Dresden informational meeting, which was held last week over at the Hanover High School on Thursday evening. Just quickly, the total Dresden expenditure budget up 4.38%. In New Hampshire, unlike in Vermont, warrant articles for negotiated settlements appear separately. If voters approve the warrant article shown here for $26,990, that amount will get added to the Dresden assessment tomorrow from voting. All said and done, net assessment, so the total amount minus revenues assessed to the towns of Hanover and Norwich, up 3.64%. Yet, the Norwich assessment, the amount that Norwich owes, is actually down 2.31%. How could that be? Well, that comes in with if we take a look at the percentage split of Norwich and Hanover students attending Dresden. Every year these numbers fluctuate a little bit. We'll see that this year, slightly like 1.8% Hanover students more were in the mix than in Norwich. So with that change there, it causes the net assessment to Norwich to go down. Next item on the list of factors influencing the tax rate is equalized pupils. Equalized pupils are actually the basis for education property taxation in Vermont. Equalized pupils are determined by the Agency of Education, and they are meant to address the fact that different students from different categories cost more or less to educate than others. Some examples include students that are English language learners, students that come from different socioeconomic backgrounds. The other factors that affect the weighting are students that come from small and rural schools. The weighted student count is used in the denominator of the formula to determine education spending per pupil. So when this number goes down, the property tax rate goes up. And this year it's going down yet again from 612.60 to 595.26. There's a couple of things that I want to stress here, though, with this figure that folks need to understand. First, this number covers students pre-K through 12. So it's not just the kids that are at Marion Cross. This also includes all of our students over at the middle school and the high school. The second thing that I want to stress here is this is not enrollment. These are equalized pupils. This does not mean the enrollment in our schools is going down. Actually, what you saw previously in that slide was that enrollment is actually ticking up. What this does mean is that the demographic makeup of our students and our families in Norwich has become less diverse. The next item on our list of factors that influence the tax rate is the yield number. But in order for the yield number to make a little bit more sense, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Vermont's Education Fund. Vermont's Education Fund is the source of education funding for all pre-K through 12 public education in the state of Vermont. This year, the Ed Fund is anticipated to have roughly about $2 billion, and the pie chart here shows you what is going into that. And you'll see it's not all property taxes. You'll see that the Ed Fund receives 100% of the sales and use tax, 25% of the rooms and meals tax, a third of the purchase and use tax, and then all of the lottery transfer, so keep playing the lottery, folks, goes into the Education Fund. And aside from a couple of other smaller sources, you'll see that the other two then pieces are the homestead and the non-homestead property tax. So what you need to understand here is that when one or more of those consumption-based taxes goes down, if the amount goes down, it needs to be made up in other areas like the property tax. Which brings us then to the yield number. So the property yield number is set by looking at the state grand list value, looking at the health of the education fund, and looking at then what school districts all across the state of Vermont are forecast to spend on education. By definition, the property yield number is the amount of per pupil spending that a $1 tax rate will generate, and the income yield number is the amount of per pupil spending that a 2% income tax rate will generate. So if your school district spends more per pupil than the numbers that you see here, your property tax rate will be higher than $1, or your income rate will be higher than 2%. The final factor in the tax rate calculation is the common level of appraisal, a measure designed to adjust the property values based on recent home sales. And for the fourth year in a row, the CLA has dropped, this time almost 10 percentage points from last year to 74.48. And because this figure is used in the denominator of the calculation, a decrease here pushes the tax rate up, and this time rather significantly. I think it's worth noting that if you take a look at this, at least from fiscal year 2019, the equalized tax rate has actually been going down in Norwich. This year, you can see that after the application of the CLA, we gain almost 50 cents on the tax rate. Okay, so we have made it this far this evening. I want to spend a brief time talking about then the property tax formula. Take per pupil spending, divide that by the property dollar equivalent yield times the statewide homestead tax rate of $1. It gives you your equalized tax rate, divide that by the CLA, and you get your local tax rate. For those of you that pay based on income sensitivity, similar formula per pupil spending, divided by the income dollar equivalent yield times the fixed income rate of 2% gives you the income tax rate. So let's take a look at the numbers. You take the Marion Cross budget, add to that Norwich's portion of Dresden, the Dresden assessment, you get total expenditures. Subtract out the revenues, you get net education spending. From there, then we take that net education spending. Come on, slide. You can do it. Divide that by the number of equalized pupils. That gives you your net ed spending per equalized pupil. Divide that by the property yield number, which gives you your equalized homestead tax rate. Divide that by the common level appraisal, and that gets you to the $1.9913 number that we gave at the very beginning of the presentation. That is what we forecast the property tax rate to be. On the income side of things, same here. We anticipate at this moment in time, those of you that pay based on income sensitivity, that number will be 2.61. How does Norwich rate in terms of per pupil spending? So if we look at figures from FY23, we see Norwich is 23rd in the state in per pupil spending. How do we rate as far as the equalized tax rate? So the tax rate prior to the application of the CLA, Norwich rates 21st in the state. Okay. That wraps up the 6 items that go into the determining of the property tax rate. But I did want to spend a little bit of time tonight because what we haven't covered is how well is the school doing? How are the kids doing? And by many measures, I would say our kids are doing extremely well. Standardized assessments, I would say, don't always show the full picture, but they can provide a snapshot. So looking at SBAC scores, which is a standardized test that we use in Vermont, in English language arts over the past few years, we can see that the percentage of Marion Cross students scoring proficient and above is significantly higher than the state average. Likewise, the numbers for math show the same thing. Perhaps a better measurement, however, is how are the students actually progressing academically during the year. Using a universal assessment tool, we see that as of January of this year, students have universally exceeded expected academic growth in both math and reading, even across different student populations. On the left, we see the percent of academic growth. The dotted line here shows where we would have expected our students to have been in January. And the bars show where our students actually were as of January. And it's reassuring to see that those bars hold true even across different student populations at Marion Cross. And finally, some non-academic related accomplishments. The board and the administration were able to work
septic system straight to leach field wouldn't work well given the problems that we've seen over those cold weather months. The Peisch property was tested. The soils there did not seem suitable for the type of system that was necessary. And after about 2 years of conversations with the Hartford administrative leadership, as well as the select board and participation in meetings with the select board, we were informed by the town of Hartford through the town of Norwich that they were no longer interested in considering a connection. That was in April of 2021. So those were the three main solutions that we thought to consider at first. Like I said, we did consider a number of others. We took nothing off the table over the course of this 4.5-year period. We did look into a connection to Hanover. There was some possibility of doing so. They said that they would be willing to open it up for Marion Cross School only, but given the length, the distance between here and the hookup to Hanover and the lack of any potential partners, that was deemed too expensive a possibility. We looked into connection to a septic system sited at the Dresden Fields and did testing out there too. The testing did show that it could be a possible space for a septic field, but again, the length and the cost that it would take to get there was deemed too expensive, although it's good information for down the road if we do ever decide to put before you the possibility of building out the Dresden Fields there with a facility that would actually provide some restrooms where all those athletic fields are. And then finally, a connection to septic system sited at other properties in town were considered, but again, due to either poor ground soil conditions, lack of interest in collaboration, or the likelihood of it being too expensive, we did not go with those options. So finally, with continued study over the course of these 4.5 years, continued work with Pathways Consulting, Lincoln Applied Geology, some changes in the state of Vermont's expansion to the approvable designs and methods that were possible to use, and benefiting from a week-long March intensive study that was conducted by 2 of our teachers over at Hanover High and about a dozen students, we settled on an innovative alternative septic system approach and put out a call for proposals. We received 2 responses to that. One which proposed an algae wheel, and the other which was from a company, Aquapoint, with their BioClear system. Based upon those responses, we decided to go with the Aquapoint BioClear system, and that's what is on the warrant for you tomorrow. The total cost of $768,414 includes the BioClear system itself and the install, but it also includes removal and replacement of 2 septic tanks, an old oil tank, replacement of installment of drainage pipes along the green to prevent excess flow coming from Main Street onto the green, repaving of Girard Way after the construction is completed, and it will allow us to better utilize the kitchen space in Marion Cross and potentially grow it out a bit as well for expanded meal programs at the school. We do hope to gain access to other federal and state funds as they become available, but that is not included in the overall cost, just in case. And the first payments for this article would not come due in the next fiscal year, but the year after that. That is Article 7. Article 8 is with regard to a possible playground that we would like to put in place at Marion Cross. So the why now? The current state of the playground is in a good bit of disrepair. If you've been on the grounds there, you'll note that the wood used in the materials of the playground is highly conducive to splintering for children's hands and feet when they're out playing on it. These are some pictures of the back playground there. It's not particularly good for the younger age children, and many of the parts have now frozen in place. It often there's a triangle there, there's some rusting in it, and there needs to be a number of pieces replaced regardless. Some have already been taken down over the years. Through some fundraising, we have been able to put up some other things throughout the grounds, some swing sets and some other equipment over the course of the past few years, but we've really reached a point in time where we need, for safety reasons and for the ability for the children to play on the grounds, some new equipment and a better setup there. And should Article 7 pass, that would also require the demolition of the playground that's in front of the school right now. Eventually, we hope to replace some of the playground equipment that's there, but the idea is that that would all be hopefully done through grant funding over the course of several years. The process that we followed, formed a committee in the school. Katie Cormier, our school counselor, oversaw that committee with participants including our administration, Sean Gagne and Greg Vagnato, as well as a number of teachers and parents. Our director of facilities was involved too. Through some fundraising, we were also able to work with a local landscape designer and architect out of Maine who's done a number of these projects throughout New England and understands the type of materials that are best utilized here. And the design focus was on inclusivity, to be able to allow all children, no matter what need, to be able to use the facilities that are put in place. So the design that the designer and architect came up with is right here before you now. And this is the back side of the building. To orient you a little bit, this is the school building, this is the basketball court, these are the swings that are in place, and then this is the where the maple syrup is made behind the building right now. A couple of spaces throughout the site design here. We've got the sand pit over here, some climbing area here, musical area here, slides, swings, all the sorts of things that you would normally expect on a playground there. But this is the design for the back side of it. One of the aspects of it too that would be added in here would be a surfacing, and we'll get to that too, which would be rubber-like, ADA compliant, and allow for all children to play safely on the equipment there. What the school district is requesting in this case is a $307,752 for the project. As I said, providing access to all, and similar to the last article, the hope is to gain access to federal funds to offset the cost, though that is not included in the $307,000 tab here. And again, the first payments would be due not next fiscal year, but the year after that. And that, Peter, is the end here, so we would be happy to entertain questions now.
Great, Tom, thank you. We're going to have public questions in a moment, but first I believe Neil O'Dell is going to make a very brief comment or two about some other issues pertaining to the
Yeah, so we just want to take an opportunity tonight to talk with folks about that equalized pupil change and the impending tax rate increase that we have coming for Norwich. Last year, the legislature passed a law that updates the weights that we use for equalized pupils. So students from poverty, English language learners, are all weighted to acknowledge that they cost more to educate. Likewise, students that attend small and rural schools, they also cost more. Unfortunately, Marion Cross has very few students in these categories, and so as a result, the forecast from the Agency of Education for Norwich shows that we're looking at about a 100 equalized pupil decline here in Norwich. And it's important to note that this, as I said before, it does not mean that we're going to suddenly see a huge loss of enrollment in our schools. It simply means that we've got a dramatically lower equalized pupil count. And so as a result of this change, we're going to be looking at a significant tax rate increase over the next few years. How significant? So if we were to apply the forecasted change in equalized pupils to the budget that we just presented tonight, where we would be looking at a tax rate increase of just over 23%. And if we assume that the budget may go up next year, that the yield number might come down, that the CLA might come down as well, that 23% could be even greater. The good news, if there is any in this situation, is that the current law provides a cap on the tax rate increase for Norwich. It's a mechanism that would allow us to phase in this tax rate change over time. If the proposed tax rate increase is greater than 5%, then the tax rate is capped at 5%. That 5% cap is available to you in each of the following 5 years, assuming that you tripped the cap the year before. There's one issue that we are working with our legislators on at the moment, and that has to do with the CLA. Since the cap is based on the final tax rate after application of the CLA, there is some concern that upon reappraisal, when the CLA shoots back up to at or near 100%, it would effectively wipe out the change that we saw in the equalized pupils. That may sound good, but at the same time, what has just happened is everybody's property values have likely shot up as a result of the reappraisal, and so we are worried that you would see the full impact of the change in the equalized pupils over a shorter period of time. We're working with our legislators on this to try to come up with a fix, a change that will help us phase in this tax rate over time. What can we do? Well, there's only a few things that we've got available to us right now. The first thing is we can just accept the higher tax rate. We can pay the additional amount. But I also wanted folks to be aware tonight that there are some other longer-term options that this town could look at. We could look at ways of changing that equalized pupil number. If we had a more socioeconomically diverse family and student population in our town, we could increase our equalized pupil count. Likewise, increases in English language learners could also increase our equalized pupil count. Neither of these scenarios are short-term fixes, but they are a possible way to adjust the tax rate increase. All right, one final item, Mr. Moderator, tonight. I'd like to spend a brief moment talking about Vermont's tuitioning system and how it impacts Norwich. If you didn't know, there are towns in the state of Norwich that don't operate their own public schools. Those towns are allowed to use public education dollars to fund the tuition for their students to attend private schools both in the state of Vermont and outside the state of Vermont. Up until this past summer, Vermont did not allow those public dollars to flow to religious schools. That all changed this summer with a Supreme Court case called Carson v. Macon. In that Supreme Court case, the court said a state does not need to provide public money to private schools, but if it does, it cannot deny those funds to a school simply because it's a religious school. So that puts us at a very awkward position in Vermont, in part because Vermont has a compelled support clause. Article 3 of the Vermont Constitution states no person ought to or of right can be compelled to attend any religious worship or erect or support any place of worship. So what you need to know, right? Your tax dollars fund these tuitions. If you remember before the slide that I showed you on sources of money to the education fund, it's not all property taxes, folks. Your sales tax, your rooms and meals tax, other taxes go into the ed fund. The other thing that you need to know is not all of the property tax money from Norwich stays in Norwich. Your property taxes are actually used to fund these public tuitions that are being paid to private schools in other towns in the state of Vermont and outside the state of Vermont. When more schools become eligible for public money, the burden on the ed fund goes up. When the burden on the ed fund goes up, then there's a great likelihood your property tax rate is going to go up as well. The final note that I will have here is that folks also need to understand that private and religious schools accepting public dollars can also have selective enrollment practices. They don't need to admit every student that's coming in with public tuition dollars. What can you do? Currently, the legislature is considering this in two bills, one in the Senate, one in the House. The one in the Senate S66 doesn't look like it's getting any traction at all at the moment. So we're going to focus on the one in the House, H258. That bill right now, unfortunately, from my perspective, is not really going anywhere. It does not seem to have a whole lot of support. Private and independent schools in the state have a very strong lobbying group. They have a lot of folks that are trying to preserve the status quo here. And right now, it doesn't look like this bill is going to advance too far. The good news is you've got at least a couple of legislators with you in the room this evening. If you have an opinion on this matter, I am absolutely certain that they would love to talk to you tonight about this. Folks, these are your tax dollars. If you care about how they are being spent, please reach out to your legislators, but also please reach out to the leaders of both House and Senate education on this matter. This is an important one. Just because we don't tuition here in Norwich doesn't mean that this issue doesn't affect you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Tom. Okay, so if you have a comment or a question, you can start queuing up to where exactly, Brendan? Are they going to be asking questions from? The microphone is there. So if you have questions or comments, and I'll just make a brief statement on this. I'm going to give everybody 2 minutes to make comments tonight. I will ask the people to be respectful, that you direct your comments and questions to me, the moderator, and I will pass them over to the presenters to answer those questions. I will let everyone who needs to speak. The only thing I'll be cognizant of is if you're being redundant, if people have already said what you're going to say, please come up to the microphone and affirm whatever you want affirmed, but you need not say and repeat the same thing that someone else had said. Those are the basic ground rules. And if it doesn't appear to be that anyone is coming up with a question or a comment for the school district. Am I correct about that? And also, if you could state your name and the article that you were referring to. I will not require you to state your locatable address because this is an informational meeting, not a situation where you actually need to be a resident of Norwich. People can speak even if they're not. Go ahead.
Thank you. Is this on? Yep. Cheryl Lindberg. I just am curious from the presentation what the school board thinks the likelihood is of receiving grant money for the playground. Do you have a sense of the likelihood of that occurring?
Tom?
Do you want to? Jamie's got a better sense of when the grants become available, so I'm going to let her speak to that.
Yeah, for the playground, Cheryl, we'll probably go after private grants, private grant funding, similar to what we did with the Marion Cross Trails. We sought private grant funding for that and got matching grants from the Byrne Foundation. The school district paid for half and the Byrnes paid for half. So with that, we would probably try to go after private first, because most of the COVID monies that have come out that would be available for infrastructure like that have been spoken for, and or we don't qualify, because we don't have high Title I funding. We don't qualify because we're a wealthier community. But we'll continually look for any grant opportunities that are available. We've actually, the Assistant Superintendent, Robin Steiner, who's here tonight, oversees all of our grants and grant funding. And we seek out and look at any possibility that comes our way to see if we can qualify. No matter how small, every bit helps. So we'll do that, and also, we'll look to see, we've been in talks with USDA about financing for the septic project, because they have financing as well that can go out longer than conventional banks, and there's no prepayment penalties there either. So we're in contact with both of them.
Appreciate the answer, appreciate the question. And again, we need not bring up other articles if they're not in the question or the comment, but no, all good, all good. Okay, it does not appear to be, okay, there are two more questioners or comments. Yes?
Yes, Jackie Allen. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much to Tom and Neil and for the terrific work you've done over the years on the school board. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm Ellen Nadinger. I just had a question. How does that BioClear process work? It looked like there were some kind of tanks, and I'm familiar with other systems like mound systems, but I was just curious.
Sure. I went through that a little too quickly. Sorry about that. So there would be a couple of tanks that would be sited likely on the side of the green right now, and would have a couple of chain link fences just surrounding them because they will be a little bit off the ground, as you saw from some of the pictures up there. What happens is that the waste would come out, would get processed by those tanks, would get sent back to another holding tank before it would be pumped out into the leach fields there. It would come out as swimming pool quality water so that once it goes into the greens, it would be safe water at that point in time after having been pre-treated. Oh, I'll let our other experts in on this.
Far from an expert, just spent a lot of time on the matter. So we would be looking at 2 tanks. It is a slow trickle flow system that goes through a special medium that's inside each one of the tanks. And so it's a biological process that occurs. We would have a grease trap installed because of the kitchen. You have to have that in order to pull out those types of solids before they go into these types of biological treatment cylinders. I will say that if anybody's really super interested in the process, we did put links on our SAU 70 website, and you can go out to the Aquapoint BioClear. They have a YouTube area where they have a lot of really great tutorials where you can see, you know, the inner workings of them and how it works and the history of the company and the product itself. They have another one in upstate Vermont, actually, that would be similar in size to this one. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for the answers. Okay, so we're all done with the school district presentation. Again, thank you to those. Yes, Neil, yeah, I want to move on because it's already getting on 8 o'clock.
Check. I know you want to move on.
Yes.
I just need to, 1 second.
This is an unscripted edition, but yeah, go ahead.
This is Tom Camden's
Yes.
last meeting as a school board member. He has decided to step down from service on the school board, but I just want to take a moment to thank Tom Camden for 11 years on the school board. Did an amazing job. It was wonderful to work with. And we're going to miss him.
Thank you. Thank you. A worthy addition. So as Neil mentioned earlier, we have state officials in the audience tonight. We have State Treasurer Mike Pysiak and Representatives Jim Masland and Rebecca Holcomb, who are going to speak to us now and I've asked them to limit their remarks, even though of course they have a much more to say, and we can contact them in other ways. But tonight they're going to be speaking for about 3 minutes each, and we're going to start with State Treasurer Mike Pysiak.
Hey, thank you very much, Tom. Can you hear me? Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you all this evening. I actually worked with Tom's father, Tom Camden, and I was trying to take a photo and text him about that raving round of applause he received for his work here in the Norwich School Board. So I'm Mike Pysiak. I grew up in Brattleboro. I now live in Winooski. So I've actually never been to a town meeting before. Brattleboro has representative town meeting. Winooski votes by Australian ballot. So it's really an extra pleasure to be here with you this evening. I was elected state treasurer this past November and took office in January. So about 2 months in as state treasurer. One of my first visits was here to Norwich. It really left a lasting impression on me because some of the things I then heard in every single other town I visited. I visited all 252 towns. And the same story that we heard here in Norwich around the lack of housing, the challenges that businesses were facing because they couldn't hire employees, because those employees couldn't find housing, They couldn't find affordable housing. They couldn't find it within driving distance anywhere near Norwich. And I thought, well, maybe that's an anomaly. But you went to the next town, you heard a very similar story. You went to the next town, you heard a very similar story. You went to different parts of the state, and you heard a very similar story. And when you actually look at the data, it does suggest that people have moved to Vermont with their higher incomes from Boston or New York or West Coast. Our personal income tax growth has really shot up the last 3 years during the pandemic, almost $400 million. You look at first-time tax filers that are making over $100,000, that has increased from 2019 to 2021 by 55%. So really significant. On the one hand, a beneficial thing for our state. On the other hand, it's putting even more pressure on our housing stock and the ability for people that live here in Vermont and get their job and their income from our state, not working remotely, to be able to afford here and live here. So one of the things the Treasurer's Office is focusing on is this program that was created in 2014 called 10% for Vermont. It allows the Treasurer to invest up to 10% of the state's cash on hand of our balance sheet back into the economy for economic development and job creation. And I just don't know of anything that would be more impactful on those two fronts than building more housing throughout our state. So we have about $20 million available, but we are revitalizing this program. We have a lot more cash on hand right now as a result of all those people moving here and all the surpluses that we've been seeing in the state. So we're going to add about $60 million to that program for a total of $80 million available for development throughout our state. We're going to announce it officially in April. We're going to have applications open in June, and we're looking for partners, nonprofits, municipalities, governmental entities to find ways to build more housing that's affordable and more affordable housing throughout our state. So I wanted to mention that here tonight. Keep thinking about what projects might be available. Please reach out to me if you have any ideas. And again, it's just a pleasure to be here with you. I really appreciate it, and I'll turn it over to Rebecca.
Or Jim. Jim Maslin.
Thank you. Nice to see you all again. Welcome to winter, at least for a week or so. Just a couple of things before the few remarks that I'm going to say. One about the CLA that you've heard about, and the other about student weights. We spent a considerable amount of time, 2 years or so in the legislature, working through the student weighting formula. And one of the things that we found out 2 years ago is that the weightings that we had, English learners, students from disadvantaged backgrounds or from small schools, for example, weren't based on empirical data whatsoever. They were some numbers that came up maybe about the time Act 60 was passed, and that was quite a long time ago. So it is unfortunate that the student weights don't work out so well for Norwich as they did previously, but it was inevitable that we had to fix them, and we had to do it fairly, so that's where we are. The other thing about the CLA is a pain in the neck for an awful lot of communities, but one of the other things that we understand is that there are lots and lots of towns in Vermont that are behind on reappraisals. It's not necessarily your fault. There just aren't enough reappraisal firms or capable people in Vermont right now to bring everybody up to snuff. So that's just the facts on the ground. So I'm going to talk just briefly in my 3 minutes, I guess, that I have about three things that Ways and Means, my committee, is working through this winter, all having to do with money, of course, and they're basically in the social services side of things. And as you understand, there are a whole lot of things going on in the legislature. Rebecca and I have put together a newsletter, as Tim and I and Margaret and I did in previous years, and they'll be available at the back table, downstairs in the clerk's office, library, any number of places. Please take as many as you think you need, because we printed plenty of them. So what's happening in Ways and Means? There's three things I want to talk about: is universal school meals, universal pre-K, and also something called paid family medical leave, which you also may have heard about. They're all expensive, but we're trying to figure out a way to get them to work within our means. Universal school meals turns out to be very important. There are a lot of kids in Vermont who come to school poorly fed. Kids that are hungry don't learn very well. They frequently have discipline problems. that are based on the fact that they are hungry despite of whatever else goes on in their homes. And so we're trying to remedy that so that universal school meals will be available. Not everybody has to participate. If you want to bring your own lunch, hey, that's fine, but at least they'll be available for everybody. And we think we can figure out how to pay for that, although we may not be really done with that until maybe the following April, right? We have a 2-year biennium. It frequently takes us quite a bit of time to get things through both House and Senate. Another one is universal daycare, pre-K. That is important for many of the same reasons that kids these days, there's an awful lot going on in the world of education, and students that have beneficial, adequate, well-trained teachers and curriculum do much better in elementary school. They do much better in high school. This is a benefit that outlasts the years that kids spend in pre-K by far. And we are determined to figure out how to do that one also. And then the last in Ways and Means that is currently in the Senate, no, it's in Ways and Means, is family medical leave, which is basically an insurance program that will enable people who either have a newborn, an adopted child, an elderly parent who's unable to continue and needs help at home or needs help from someone else. It'll enable someone in that household to take care of them. A newborn, as I said, an adopted child, an elderly parent, or maybe even one of us if we're injured at work and we have to take time off. So the paid family medical leave insurance program is intended to remedy that situation. The current bill that's come from House General and is now in Ways and Means is probably one of the more generous versions of this in the country. And whether or not it survives in its present form and whether or it gets pared down a little bit and what, we do not know. It's also something it's fairly expensive, but that will be paid for by approximately, if it goes through to its full implementation, about a 5 or 5.55, we could say. Let's start that over again so the math makes sense. 5% payroll tax, right? It'll go into an insurance fund and it'll be paid out for benefits, and it'll take probably about at least 1 year for the fund to build up before that insurance program starts to pay out. That's a fairly sophisticated program. It may take as many as 40 employees to run it, and that's part of the expense. But we're working through that line by line to see if we can get that effectively implemented. So I'm going to turn this over to Rebecca. By the way, all of you are very lucky to have Rebecca as a state representative. Tim Briglin did an outstanding job, but it turns out we have some 50 new members in the House. One is Rebecca. She is probably the most qualified and experienced new member that we have seen for some time. As you know, she was a candidate for governor. It didn't quite work out that time, but she was also Secretary of Education and knows that side of things inside and out. So again, pleasure and an honor to be here. Please reach out to us any day on any issue. It's our job to find answers. And as I'm fond of saying to people, if you call us about something and I don't know the answer, I learned something trying to figure out what it is I need to help you with. And so, Rebecca, stand up. And
thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Representative Maslin and Rebecca Holcomb. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, too. It's kind of fun to be here in my own hometown, so thank you for having me here tonight. And I'll try to not talk too long because I know you have the town budget to go through, too. This is an unprecedented time. It's so good to be here, and I'm going to start by just acknowledging the select board and the school board, because I want you to understand how hard the job is that they have right now, because I'm seeing it in the legislature. We are in an unusual moment. Right now, our state budget is almost $2 billion more than it was just a few years ago. That's the effect of federal money coming through. Thank you, Pat Leahy, Senator Pat Leahy. We got more money per capita than any other state in the nation. That money has boosted our budgets. It's made us able to do all kinds of things that we wouldn't have been able to do without it. And some of it is starting to dry up. And that's what we're seeing at the state level right now. We have this unprecedented money from the federal government that has generated a state surplus, and we're now looking at a 9% decrease in state revenues next year. I was lucky enough to be put on the House Appropriations Committee. Our job is to listen to the governor's proposal and to try to plan how we budget for the next year, but also for future years in ways that make sure we're taking care of our state and our investments as we go, and thinking of the future as we plan how to get through the current year. And what we're seeing is this federal money is like a huge wave that came through, and now it's receding. And some aspects of state government are in really rough shape. So as we have this last bit of federal money, we're asking, how do we spend it to make our state stronger and better, not just today, but for our children in the future? I'm thrilled, Mike, that you talk so much about housing, because as we sit in House Appropriations and hear from department after department, you can't help but think that our shortage of housing is the biggest problem we face as a state. We are the state with the highest rate of homelessness in the country right now. We trail only Washington, D.C. Because we're a rural state, that isn't always as obvious. We don't see the density of homelessness that you might see in more urban areas. But make no mistake, we are in an epic crisis of housing shortage right now. And the only way out of it is to build more. And building more also, as Mike said, does increase our long-term capacity to take care of our people. We're in a desperate workforce shortage right now. And that workforce shortage is caused in part by our housing shortage. And if you talk to businesses across the state, they'll tell you over and over again, I tried to hire, but I can't, because when I offer the job, they tell me they can't find a place to live. When you talk to our hospitals, when you talk to the VNA, when you talk to our child care workers, when you talk to our school districts, when you talk to people in our hospitality sector, they can't afford to hire people because people can't afford to find a place to live. You go to the Norwich Inn some nights, they might not seat you because they can't find staff. It's everywhere. And we have to find a way as a state to work together to expand the supply of housing in this state. Mike mentioned some fantastic ideas. He's not alone. The House Appropriations Committee took some of that surplus that we found and we put it back into housing to make sure that the people building housing in the state know that this state is going to continue to put resources behind housing, because that's how we create the bright future for people. We're also doing some other things. We've noticed, and some of you may have noticed if you've tried to get health care recently, that we have an acute and critical shortage of nurses in the state. Because we can't find nurses who live here and are Vermonters working in Vermont healthcare facilities, we're hiring very expensive travelers, sometimes at 3 times the cost. We are making heavy investments right now to raise the Medicaid and the Medicare matching rates for the people who provide our frontline care, and we're investing in training primary care doctors and nurse preceptors and nurses so that we actually have the social infrastructure to care for our population as it ages. Those are the kinds of things that we're doing to try to make your lives better. And it's going to take your help, but it's also going to take the work of people like the people who are presenting your budgets tonight. So I really do want to acknowledge the Select Board. They're dealing with the same volatility we're dealing with at the state level, and they're doing their best to try to manage those one-time monies in ways that make our communities stronger, while thinking about softening the blow or the landing as we move into a slightly leaner time, so that we know that we're taking care of our neighbors and we're planning for the future at the same time. So I have to take a minute just to thank 2 people. And the first person is, I'd like Bonnie to stand up. Because Bonnie, first of all, I gotta admit, I asked her if I could have a little meeting downstairs. And she looked at me yesterday and she said, oh, Rebecca. And I knew she wanted to say no, and she couldn't say no because that's Bonnie. Bonnie doesn't know how to say no because Bonnie has worked for 30 years to try to take care of our community. And that is a monumental commitment. It is not easy being in public service right now. I didn't appreciate all the little details, the hidden things that you do to make sure this town moves and moves smoothly. So I did want to acknowledge you, Bonnie, and I actually asked the Secretary of State to put together this acknowledgement of your service. And I'd like to take this moment just to recognize you and share this plaque for you, because what you have done for this community is something that we're all deeply indebted for. So thank you. And I'll hug you later. I don't, you may not know this. A lot of us thought that the mailing voting, the ballots that you got mailed out, everyone thought that worked really, really well. What you may not know is that Bonnie was bird dogging all the mistakes that were made. And some of you got a ballot because she noticed that there was an error and tracked it down and made sure you got it. So there are so many ways in which the people who work in our town do things every day that we don't notice because we only notice when things don't go right. So thank you for making it seamless so we don't even notice all the stuff you do.
Thank you, Rebecca.
One last one.
Oh,
I'm going.
there's one more.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
But I also just have to acknowledge Tom. And Tom, I'm acknowledging you because you have taken this community through 2 school funding formula changes, all kinds of epic changes in how we regulate and ask you to do things. And it's really hard being in a municipal role that long. So I really wanted to take this moment also to acknowledge you and your service. That's a long time to serve on a board these days. And you know what we have to understand is we are running through the people who volunteer their time to stand up and serve our community. And we owe you so much for your willingness to stick with us for 11 years and make this a bright future for our kids and our community. So I want to thank you as well. We have extra town reports in the back. I know you know how to find me because I've heard from a lot of you about the school funding and the funding of religious schools and homophobia in particular. And please continue to reach out to me. I know how important it is to you that your tax dollars aren't funding things that you feel are homophobic or unconstitutional. And I hear you. We hear you. We will continue to work to stand up for our neighbors and for the dignity of our fellow Vermonters, and so please do continue to reach out to me.
Thank you, Representative Holcomb. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the select board now. We're not having Q&A for our elected officials, but we really appreciate their time, and you know where to find them, of course. So we're going to move on to the financial issues that the select board is bringing on the ballot and we're going to start with Aaron Lamperti is going to be talking about Article 9, 10, 14, 39, and 40, if you're following along on your ballots. And the reason I'm doing this, I'm bundling things that are related. These are financial matters that Aaron's going to speak to, and when Aaron is finished with his presentation, I'll open it up for public questions and comment. So Aaron Lamperti. And I won't be reading these warrants because they're part of Aaron's presentation and you'll see them on the screen. So I'm not going to read the warrants.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to try and go through this pretty fast. I can switch my slides with the phone. I saw Neil doing that. I thought that was clever. It works. All right, so I have this in three sections. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to do that with questions, but we're going to go through the budget, go quickly through some articles, and then I do have a slide of sort of current projects that we want to sort of debrief or hand off to the next board. By the way, the photo. Okay, I'll try and keep it close. By the way, the photographs here are from Cody Williams over here. Thank you very much, Cody. So Article 9, sorry, seeing is slow. Article 9 is the budget article. We came up with a budget of $5.5 million this year, including, or I'm not sure, plus the articles. That's an 11.3% increase from last year's town budget. The articles also, monetary articles are also increasing 8%. That's a net change of just over 11%. The departments with the largest changes in decreasing order, or the largest fractional changes, are Public Works, Administration, meaning mostly the town manager's office and that sort of thing, the Police Department, and Recreation. Can't hear. So we went through a budget process. This is the clip.
But now, is that better?
I'll shove it right in my mouth here.
Okay.
So we went through a budget process. We didn't have as much support with our last town manager leaving right at the beginning of the budget process. So we started with our interim finance director putting together a budget that was essentially last year's budget plus a cost of living and inflation increase across the board. And we started with that, handed that out to department heads. Department heads went through it, modified it according to their needs, and we tried to ask them to do that in as minimal way and as possible. And then we asked them also if they had specific larger needs to single those out or separate those out so that we could consider them separately, so that we we knew what we were trying to work with. So we reviewed those adjusted budgets. We sort of held aside some things that were larger, that were separate, that represented changes from the previous budget, and then we put all that together, again, mostly with a great deal of help from our interim town manager and finance director, to a final budget. That was not a completely typical process, I don't think. So some of our priorities for this fiscal year 24 budget, the one that we did just put together, was a town manager search. We were budgeted first $50,000, which we reduced to $30,000, as I recall, to try to do a broader, more thorough search. We consolidated some administrative functions, or we're working towards doing that, into the town manager's office. There were some half-time administrative positions that we put together with an additional half-time position to create a new administrator in the town manager's office, primarily to focus on, we're hoping or thinking to focus on HR matters and on grant tracking, because we're not really doing a great job, particularly with grant tracking, I believe. We put a lot of time into supporting the police department in its rebuilding efforts this year, which obviously we all know the department was decimated by people leaving. We were down to one officer, so we did what we could to help with that effort. We included a full-time assistant for the rec department, which hopefully we're hoping will be a revenue neutral addition. So the tax impact of this budget is here and broken out by a couple categories of property value. For a $250,000 property, the town portion of the tax bill will be $1,666 estimated at this point. So here's our expenditure town expenditure since 2010. This has been, I adjusted this into 2023 dollars because I think it demonstrates something that isn't obvious if you do this graph in absolute dollars, which is that the town budget is remarkably flat. We see a couple of bumps here, including this 2024 fiscal year is up a little bit, but actually it's remarkably consistent across the board. There's a couple of categories here at the bottom, which are obviously small fractions, the debt service, the monetary articles, and reserve fund allocations. Reserve funds, so our allocation this year is up a bit. The way I see this graph, I don't know, I wasn't here on the select board for all these years, but to me, this reads that we're rebuilding our reserve fund allocation from its sort of historical or recent historical high level, which went way down for reasons that I don't really know because I wasn't on the board in 20 and 21, presumably COVID related. But we're trying to get it back to and try to get it back so that it's really adequately funding reserve funds for the capital budget that we have, and we have quite an extensive capital budget for the fire department, for the buildings, for public works, and if the reserve funds are our basic mechanism for funding that. Here to put some context on the town budget. The town budget here is the blue line at the bottom. The other lines are Dresden, total school budget, Dresden portion, and the Marion Cross portion. So the town fraction of our of our spending is the lesser part. Again, these are adjusted in 2023 dollars, and they're all quite flat as a result. So some articles that are select board articles. So we mistakenly, I would say, put forward a request to create an ARPA reserve fund for the monies that we got from the ARPA program. In fact, that should not be going into a reserve fund. It should be going into a revenue fund. So, and of course, we discovered that language issue late in the game after the ballot was published. So I don't believe we need a vote to establish a revenue fund. So, and I don't think it much matters whether this passes or not, but if you feel like voting no, that will make our lives a little simpler. Fire department funds, Article 14, the Norwich Fire Department responded to a state program to step up the medical EMTs in the department, including myself, to vaccinate people on an emergency basis around the state. And so we did quite a few shifts of vaccinating, and the town got what was it, $46,800 from that program. It went into the general fund. So the fire department is asking you to move that money from the general fund into the fire equipment reserve fund so we can use it for our future equipment needs. And my dad's calling. Bad timing. So the Articles 39 and 40 are the sort of standard articles about the timing of tax collection and penalties on late taxes. We've adjusted them a little bit. So the first installment date we've moved from the middle of August to the end of August. And this has to do with, it's slightly complicated, but it has to do with escrowed state property taxes and mortgage companies, and the timing of the state tax payments and the mortgage companies determining the payment schedules. And it causes people to have excess payments in the beginning of the year and lesser payments in the second half of the year, which can be quite challenging for people on a fixed income. So a bunch of people came to us and spoke about this, and moving the date out a little bit makes it more likely that the timing will work out, so that people's mortgage payments will be even through the year. There's some discussion about whether or not changing the date would have an impact on school in terms of their cash flow, but we're working on a payment plan that very likely that will not be an issue. And then we changed the late penalty for late taxes from 8% to 4% because we thought 8% was punitive, unnecessarily punitive. So we just felt that if you're a few hours or a few days late, that 8% seemed excessive. So we just reduced it to 4%. So that's what I have for the budget.
Yeah,
how do you want to proceed?
We're going to pause here and open up questions or comments on those articles, and then Aaron, I'll invite you back up. Questions or comments on Articles 9, 10, 14, 39, and 40? Looks like we have at least two. And if you would, again, your name and which article you are referring to in your question or your comment.
Okay, Cheryl Lindberg. I'm speaking on the budget article. Sorry, I don't have my book open, but it's
Budget,
okay.
Article
Number
9. Yeah.
So I would like to know from the select board the answer to the question of, in the administrative budget increase, is there a plan for an assistant town manager for our town?
Thank you. Would somebody like to tackle that?
I think the answer is yes. There is that was what I was referring to. One of the changes that I was referring to in the administration, we want to add a position which will be a, well, we want to add one position that will manage a lot of other administrative duties, and then promote or add a position from a town manager's assistant to an assistant town manager, and that position would have sort of higher level duties. And our idea would also be that in the event that we didn't have a town manager, which seems to be a regular occurrence in this town, we would have an assistant town manager so we wouldn't have to be quite as scrambling quite as much to get an interim town manager in those
Looks like
events.
you're asking a follow-up. I'll let you have one brief follow-up.
Thank
Go ahead.
you. Thank you. Well, I wanted to mention that I've researched in our town, in our state, I'm sorry, where there are assistant town managers are places like Brattleboro and South Burlington, and this layer of administrative expense just doesn't seem to be something that our town should bear the cost of. And so I would like to say overall, my comment is to not support this budget at this time, to allow a second stab at it, because it was rushed, because there is a high increase to this budget, which started out by the select board asking to flat budget over last year's numbers, and then increases occurred, and all of a sudden we're at this 11% significant increase. And to the point of the recreation, I did look and I see that the cost of the administrative or the assistant and the overall budget cost for recreation is greater than the revenue budgeted. So I think that should be looked at again, so we can work out a way to make it revenue neutral. So that was something that I just wanted to point out.
Thanks for the comment. Next, sir.
Garrett Palm, 15 Bramall Lane, Norwich. Could you just talk a little bit about 39, just to make sure what the actual plan is? Because I've heard a few, this is the one about moving the tax due date, and I think I just want to be careful just hearing some of the potential solutions, which are, well, the director of finance at the SAU will just kind of figure it out year to year, depending if there's an issue. Maybe we can have the Hanover taxpayers, kind of float us every once in a while. It doesn't sound like a very good solution for what at the end of the day just seems like a very simple thing. And for taxpayers, just, hey, why wouldn't I want to pay my taxes a few days later? But it could cause some fairly serious issues that may just put all this weight on someone like Jamie Teague, who is already, overburdened.
Sure.
I think there was a question in there somewhere. I believe it's a little bit of clarification on 39.
This is what I heard. We have some potential solutions, but is there a solution?
Yeah. Roger.
Sure. Hi. So thank you, Aaron, for letting me try this. So I'm really appreciative that we actually have some of our legislators in here so they can talk about, with better clarity than the board, about the remittance schedule from the state for payments. So our tax date has been traditionally held, we have to collect taxes 30 days after the bills come out, right? And so traditionally, what that has meant is that the remittance from the state for the income sensitive payments have come sort of after the bills have been issued, right? Leading to a moment of correcting our tax bills, right? So we create sort of a vulnerability in our processes and our internal controls, and so we were looking to avoid that. To the point that I think was being made is we don't necessarily know to what great extent Norwich residents are impacted, but I think with a payment schedule that we hope to create between our management team and the school's management team, we'll be able to ensure that timely delivery of that payment is made, while also in consideration of people who receive a remittance of income sensitivity and don't have to face an adjusted tax bill, leading to credits and just some frustration.
Great.
So I'm happy to answer it, and as I said, I'm glad that we
Thank
have
you,
people
Ren.
who can speak
No,
to the
that-
remittance process from the state. So thanks,
Great.
Aaron.
I'm gonna ask even the board to limit their comments as much as they can to 2 minutes roughly in response. Sir, yes.
Irv Tomei, 528 New Boston Road. I too am concerned about Article 9. I respect Cheryl Lindbergh, with whom I've worked in the past. And I'm disturbed that the administration section of the budget doesn't mention, quote, assistant town manager. It has a line item called, if I believe, well, I shouldn't take an instant to look it up, but I think I can. And I think it says administrative assistant. Administrative wage. It shows a 52.7% increase for administrative assistant. It says nothing about an assistant town manager. I think that's a major step, and I'm disappointed that the board wasn't more forthcoming about this. I'm also concerned about the great increase in the rec department budget. I'd like to know how many additional positions, not now on the town payroll, are included in this budget and what their approximate total cost will be. As you can guess, I'm planning to vote no on Article 9. Thank you.
Do you want to briefly address how many positions? There was a question there, briefly. Thank you.
My recollection is that we added essentially 2 half-time positions, and we also moved a half-time administrative assistant from one department to another to make it a full-time. So my recollection is half in the rec, half administration, and then we moved a half as well. So it looks like we added a person in the administration, but we took half away from somewhere else.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Hi, Lily Tryman. Can we go back to Garrett's question, since the answer didn't really address it, please, and tell me what you've talked about with Jamie Teague in terms of offsetting a later payment date for the taxes?
You're talking about Article 39?
Article 39, yes, sorry.
Can you hear me? Marcia Calloway. We are in the process of talking to the school district and collecting data here. We needed some more data, I believe, than we had. And so our office here in finance is going to be doing some investigation about how many people were actually affected. And Jamie is putting together a payment plan, basically, so that we can understand how much we need to pay and when we need to pay it, so that we avoid any problems with having to borrow monies in order to pay this. But it's not settled.
Great, thank you. So now we're going to move on to Articles 11 and 15, which were put up by the board but not directly financially related. So Aaron is, I believe, putting them up. Article 11, I'll just read it unless you want. Go ahead, Aaron, if you'd like to. Okay, Article 11 is an advisory vote. Shall the voters advise the town to consider the appointment of a full-time police officer in addition to the 3 budgeted full-time police officers for a total of 5, including the chief? And if we could show Article 15. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Article 12. Shall the voters authorize the elimination of the officer? Oh, actually, I was thinking 15 because it wasn't necessarily right in my. Hold on that. Apologies. So Article 15 I will read. Shall the voters authorize the select board to appoint the town clerk as provided in 17 VSA section 2651EA1. So I'd like to address these two particular warrant articles at this time. If the board would like to add anything, you're welcome to.
And all I was going to say is that 15 was put on the select board put 15 on the ballot at the request of the retiring town clerk, and oh yes, 11 is a petition article. However, the actual language in that petition was not appropriate to the statutory, structures of petitioned articles. So we voted the actual petition article down, and then some select board members had suggested this replacement, and which we passed.
Thank you. So I'm inviting public comment on these two articles now. Yes.
Mr. Moderator, I'm so used to going in consecutive order, it's getting a little confusing. And I usually see the moderator identifying the articles and looking for comments. But anyway, I think I know that we're now talking about 11.
Yes.
And
15.
And 15.
Yes.
I like to speak to 15, Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
So, I believe in democracy, and I believe in keeping the right to vote for our elected officials. Bonnie's been town clerk and in the town clerk's office longer than I have been town treasurer, but we were both elected in '96, so we do share 27 years together, and it's been a long relationship, and we haven't always agreed, but Bonnie and I have always been able to talk and sort out our differences, and I am speaking against this article because I believe in the right to elect our officials and keep checks and balances in our government and not have the authority of the town clerk's office become another responsibility of the select board. So Bonnie and I have talked this out. I'm not saying anything tonight that we haven't already hashed out a few different times in our private conversations. But I just want to say that I do not support, appointing our town clerk.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the comment. Yes.
Hi, good evening. Demo Sophronis, Norwich, 82 Glenridge Road. I would like to speak in support of Article 11. And Aaron Lamperti said it best a few minutes ago when he said the police department has been decimated and they're now working to get up to par. Just want to give you a little history. It's only going to take a few minutes, under the three. 2009 to 2021, 4 police officers, to include the chief, plus the money in the budget to pull in 2 part-timers as needed to ensure 20 hours a day, 7 days a week coverage, and give the regular officers the necessary time for safety reasons off. 2021 to 2022, we lost 2 chiefs and 3 officers, one of which was a new community safety officer position approved by the town manager and funded. August 2022, only 1 officer left, Officer Ingraham, who did a fabulous job of keeping hope alive and offering some coverage along with limited state police coverage. November 2022, new chief Wade Cochran hired and tasked with rebuilding the police department to the previous approved 2009 levels. And that came from the Police Services Committee, which I served on and was accepted by the Select Board and put into place. I'm finishing up. Please don't chase me out. February 2023, Officer Chelsea Maxim is hired, and as of today, with the addition of our new Sergeant Stuart Rogers, we now have the 4 officers, including the chief. The position in Article 11 will allow the community safety officer position to be filled again and the funding put back in the budget, thus replacing the part-timers and ensuring that we continue to provide the 20-hour, 7-day coverage that we have had and enjoyed since 2009. This will also give the officers the proper safety time off without reducing police coverage to the town of Norwich. And I want to finish by saying we've all had incidents in the past when we didn't have police, and hopefully we don't have that in the future. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you for the comment.
I just want to speak very briefly in my thought process with Article
Bonnie, maybe could you, yeah.
Article 15. At the time I approached the Select Board, for most of my 30 years, no one has ever shown an interest in my position, and I would be questioned about it. And my thought process was at that time, because there has been so much upheaval in our town offices, to at least have a continuation of government, at least in my office, with people who know how my office works. And unfortunately, people that are good for the position and people that have worked in municipal government are excluded for holding these positions because you have to be a Norwich resident to become elected. And other town clerks in the state are doing it. Many retiring town clerks will be coming before their boards asking for similar articles. It's not new, it has been happening. And really, at the end of the day, it's not my decision, it's yours. I'm good with it anyway. That's why it's presented to the voters. So, that's all.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment.
Yep, Irv Tomei again. One of the best things about this town is we do still mostly interact with each other as face-to-face, as individual to individual. So I agree strongly with some of my friends about some things, and I disagree with them about others. On this one, I strongly support Bonnie's suggestion. I believe it's appropriate to have an appointed clerk, an appointed clerk, appointed by the Select Board. And let me give you a little bit of a historical reason why I think that. I've been a Norwich resident since 1975. And when I first settled here, one of the best things about this town was the way that people with very different educational and economic backgrounds worked together, respected each other, took each other's thoughts seriously, without regard to economic status. Our town has changed a great deal. We are now a town that very few people can afford to live in who grew up here, who come from a multi-generational background in this town. And that has the side effect that many people who were residents can no longer be residents and are no longer considered qualified to be elected to office in this town under state and local law. I think that's the most important reason to let us to consider an appointed clerk who can carry on the traditions that Bonnie has set. And I would also point out that I've seen a few comments on the listserv about, well, we'll just go out and steal a town clerk from somewhere else. But the people who suggest that are also people who don't seem to like the way things are being done now. So I don't understand. I think that's a straw man. I repeat, I think that this article deserves support because, frankly, I think Judy Crusoe deserves support and has earned the right to continue as our town clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment.
My name is Karen Ness. I don't understand why we don't have a town manager, we don't have a treasurer, but we do have people in this community who want to be elected, who want to work for the community. we're saying, no, let's just have a select board pick people and eliminate having people run for governmental positions within this town. And I think Bonnie has done a wonderful job. I think Judy will be a great person. But this is an elected office, and we're just changing it at the spur of the moment. When we have people running for these positions, oh, no, we don't want you to run. We don't want you to be involved. We're going to appoint somebody that we like. I don't understand it. And especially since we're in such turmoil at the moment, I think having new people wanting to be part of the government is a good thing, because I've also heard select board members say, once we're elected, we don't care about the opinions of the town, and we don't need to listen to them. And it's not the Norwich that I've known for 38 years.
Thank you for the comment. That was in reference to Article 15. All right, I'm not seeing any other comments on this particular article, and I will make very clear which articles we are talking about. The reason I clustered them is because I wanted to discuss the financial matters that the Select Board wanted to bring us first, and then discuss these separate matters. So we are now moving on to Article 12, which I will read. Aaron, do you have it up there? Okay, great. Article 12, shall the voters authorize the elimination of the office of lister and replace it with a professionally qualified assessor hired by the town? Would someone like to speak to this issue? Yes.
Thank you. Cheryl Lindbergh. Again, I believe in democracy. I believe in electing our officials for our town. And I think that the direction on this article moves us into the same direction as the previous article being discussed about putting the authority all in the hands of 5 individuals who have their hands very full. I do not urge you to vote against this because of me. I am urging you to vote against this because of us electing our own officials. And we have a hybrid arrangement right now in the lister's office, which works really well. And we would love people to come in and speak with us and talk with us. We hear from people by email and by phone. We've helped a gazillion people in this town with questions. And, you know, the record is pretty darn clear as to the success of the office in getting the work done. And the decline of the CLA, as I've mentioned on the listserv, is the result of a select board in 18 wanting to wait for the deterioration of the CLA in order to determine that there would be another town-wide reappraisal. And that was not a great strategy. So the listers have pushed to fill the reappraisal fund with dollars to support a reappraisal sooner than was chosen to have happen until the state mandated it. And now we have to do it. And it has, as you can see tonight, created a problem for the school rates. What would it have been like if we had continued doing that which the listers recommended? And therefore, I think you need the listers to be the voice of reason in these matters.
Thank you for the comment.
Demos Afrodis again. Norwich, 82 Glen Ridge Road. There's an old saying that says, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. The listers have worked very well over the years. There was a time where they didn't have people that stepped up to the plate to be listers, but I think with some advertising out into the community and stuff, that could change. It's always worked well, and like Cheryl said just a few minutes ago, that having a little bit of a local flavor when you have a problem and going to somebody, it just means a lot. Instead of going to an assessor who is a professional assessor that says, oh, well, you know, you got this and you've got that, and so therefore, bingo. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
I stand with my position.
Oh, could you identify yourself again?
Oh, yeah. Karen Ness. I stand with my position that if we have people running for offices in this town, which were historically elected officers, we should keep it that way. I also know that we have 45 days after we vote for this to find an appraisal firm to work for this town. Good luck with that. Also, Hanover and Lebanon both had an experience with this when they got rid of their listers department and their reappraisals did not work out well. And fourth, the state of Vermont is looking at having appraisals of property done in a different way because of the lack of appraisal firms. So it's quite likely that the state might step in and change the way appraisals are done in the state of Vermont. I don't think this is the time to be changing the way that we do things in the town of Norwich.
Thank you for the comment.
Irv Tomei, 528 New Boston Road.
He could speak a little closer to the mic.
Irv Tomei, 528 New Boston Road. I may surprise you all by saying that I oppose this article. And the common denominator between my opposition to this and my support for the appointment of the town clerk is staying with local people who are experienced in the job. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. I don't see any other comments on Articles 11, I'm sorry, on Article 12. So we will now move on to Article 14, which I will read. Article 14, shall the voters of the town of Norwich approve transfer, I'm sorry, did I get the wrong? 13, sorry. Article 13, shall the voters authorize a 10-year exemption from property taxes to the Norwich Farm Foundation under the provisions of 32 VSA Section 3840. And Omer Tryman, go ahead.
Omer Tryman speaking as a member of the Norwich Farm Foundation. So this article concerns a 6-acre property at 701 Turnpike Road, which has not been taxed for the past 20 years. It was previously owned by the Sieglers and then Vermont State Colleges. The Norwich Farm Foundation is a young, new nonprofit trying to build what we believe is the future of dairy farming in Vermont from the ground up, and with a lot of headwinds. We've dedicated the property to benefiting this community and serving the public in general, and are asking the community for its continued support in our endeavor. And we ask that you please vote yes on Article 13 and continue to keep the property tax exempt. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
John Farrell, Turnpike Road. I see no reason to give the Norwich Farm Foundation or the Norwich Farm Creamery a 10-year tax exemption in view of the fact that our taxes have gone up so much at Norwich, and it's going to put more of a tax burden on the citizens of Norwich. Until they meet all the requirements of a tax-exempt property, I would vote no on that.
Thank you for the comment. I'm not seeing other questions or comments on Article 13. Okay, so what we're going to do now is move on to Article 16 through 38. And I'm asking the organizations that wish to speak on their various articles to limit their comments to 2 minutes. I'll read the article and then I will ask someone who represents that organization, if they are present, to speak on it. And if we could change the screen to Article 16. You don't have those, okay. So you all have them in your handouts, I believe, but I'll start by reading Article 16. Shall the voters appropriate $13,920 to advance transit to be used to help cover operating costs and provide matching funds for grants for the support of providing public transportation services? Do we have a representative to speak to this article, advanced transit? Seeing none, I believe, we will move on to Article 17. Article 17. Shall the voters appropriate $20,000 to the Cemetery Commission under 18 VSA Section 5361 to supplement the interest from the Perpetual Care Trust Fund for maintenance of the town's cemeteries? Do we have a representative to speak to this article?
This
money is geared towards the maintenance of the cemeteries. As a lot of you may remember, we lost our mowing people. We were able to keep our mowing local and therefore a lot of our rates down. But throughout the pandemic and after which, the gentleman that was mowing our property had suddenly had a viable business down to one person doing the mowing. And when we reached out, it was not much different with other local people. All in all, we have 13 cemeteries that we have the upkeep for. And after Memorial Day, although we tried very, very hard to have somebody in there, especially for the veterans, and it's the time of year that people do pick to go visit their loved ones. It was rather embarrassing that we couldn't maintain even our two biggest cemeteries. We are able to keep the same company that will take us through this summer into next fall, and next year we actually might have to increase this request because the cost of services are rapidly rising. So thank you for your thoughts for this article.
Thank you for the comment. Let's move on to Article 18. And if people in the back, I appreciate, because we want to hear these presentations, these brief presentations. Article 18, shall the voters appropriate $4,348 to the Child Care Center of Norwich to be used for income-sensitive scholarships for Norwich children? Do we have a representative from the Child Care Center? No. Okay. Article 19, shall the voters appropriate $3,000 to Community Access Television, CATV, for video recordings for meetings for local government transparency, which I believe we have tonight? Any comments on this? Article 20, shall the voters appropriate $3,000 to Good Beginnings to be used for the support of programs? Any representatives? Article 21, shall the voters appropriate $1,704.50 to the Green Mountain Economic Development Corporation to be used to offer support for new, growing, and relocating businesses? Nobody from the Green Mountain Economic Corporation, Development Corporation, okay? Article 22, shall the voters appropriate $2,500 to Headrest to be used for the operation of a crisis 24/7 hotline? Anybody? Article 23, shall the voters appropriate $1,500 to the Norwich American Legion to be used for the Legion's Memorial Day observance? I believe we have a comment.
Yes, we do. Demos Sophonis, Norwich. I just want to let everybody know what the $1,500 buys you, if you will.
And again, if I could ask the folks in the back to, can't quite hear Demo here.
I can't hear you.
Go ahead.
So anyway, I would like to just kind of brief those that might not know what the $1,500 is all about. Up until COVID hit us, we had a Memorial Day parade every year, and it's something that really kind of brought the town together. People really enjoyed it. As a matter of fact, when we couldn't have it anymore, there was a lot of comments about, when are you going to have it again? So the $1,500 is for the flags that we fly on the main street, and also it's the upkeep of those flags. It's also the Memorial Day parade and a nice little cookout that we put out on the green and have a band at the gazebo, and so that's what that's all about. That $1,500 has been that same amount for probably 15 years that I can remember, and I've been in with the Legion quite a while. So please, hopefully you'll support that, and we thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Article 24, shall the voters appropriate $5,000 to Norwich Community Nurse, Inc. to be used for partial financial support of the Norwich Community Nurse, Inc. project? If you'd like, sure. Yeah, I don't see why not.
And right by the slide. I, Brenda and Kathy, would you like to come up and anyways, can you hear me? Hello? 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 I'm Dr. Ellen Nadinger. I'm the nurse practitioner that is the president of the Norwich Community Nurse, Inc., and we are just kind of getting off the ground. We started our program in 2020, and the Norwich Community Nurse provides free services to residents of Norwich of all ages through assessment and coordination of nursing care, education, and access to resources to fill the healthcare gaps that we have in our healthcare system now. We also have a heavily used medical equipment bank, and I just wanted to mention parish and community nurses have evolved over the last 3 to 4 decades in a supportive role as there have been more challenges in the healthcare system. And since hiring our community nurse, Kathy Watson, Kathy's here, wave, yay, in this past year in 2022, she's had 343 client contacts through home visits, telephone calls, emails, and currently she has 39 active clients. And we pay her for 10 hours a week, and the demand far exceeds this. She's currently working about 20 to 30 hours per week. Hence, the Norwich Community Nurse is requesting $5,000 in town funding to support this really valuable service. And if anybody has any questions, they can ask us, and we put out some literature at the back. Thank you.
And I will allow for public comment and question after we go through all of these as well, in case anybody does have a thought or two to add. Article 26, Article 25. Shall the voters appropriate $8,000 to the Norwich Historical Society and Community Center to support these programs that support the celebration of historic events? Yes.
Hi, I'm Heidi Webster, Secretary of the Norwich Historical Society Board. I'm not going to share all the wonderful things we're doing that I've written down in the interest of time, but I want to remind you that we offer school programs. We care for Norwich's history. We offer Norwich history programs. We're a community center. And the Norwich Historical Society has one half-time employee, the director, a hardworking board, and volunteers. We fundraise each year to meet our operations budget through memberships, annual gifts, grant projects, fundraising events, and this town appropriation, which supports 7% of our budget this year. We've kept our funding requests flat for over 10 years and are deeply grateful to the town for supporting our work. The town allocation is an important component of our budget, and I thank you all.
Thank you. Article 26, shall the voters appropriate $3,500 to the Norwich Lions Club to be used to underwrite the fireworks for the Norwich Fair in celebration of the 260th year of the town's charter? Lions Club, fireworks. Article 27, shall the voters appropriate $337,000 to the Norwich Public Library Association to be used for operating expenses of the library? Lucinda.
Hi, Lucinda Walker, Director of the Norwich Public Library. Thank you to the diehards who stay this late. It is awesome to be back in person, and this is my 20th time standing here at this microphone at this event to tell you all the wonderful things that are happening at your public library. First off, I want to say the last 3 years have been challenging but deeply rewarding because of all of you. Your support through our town appropriation request, your donations to our annual fund, your volunteering, and most importantly, using the library has kept us active and pushing forward. We have a new strategic plan, 3 goals of which ensure the accessibility, free accessibility to information that you need and that your kids need, your grandchildren need. We want to foster an environment where the community can engage and connect. And let me just say, in the last few months, you all have come in. You're seeing friends you haven't seen in a long time. You're meeting new people at art shows and at writing groups and at tech help. And it is just delightful to be surrounded by your three-dimensional joy, frankly. I just have to say it's just been delightful. Since July, in your town report, that's from last year, since July we've offered 117 programs and 25 people have attended. We have new after-school programming 2 to 3 times a week. We have new adult programs, including our very popular Mending Cafe, a writing group, and thanks to the Friends, a 3-month piloting chair yoga series that starts tomorrow, hybrid, in person and on Zoom. We continue to work with our wonderful partners in town, including Marion Cross School, the Historical Society, Vital Communities, and the Rec Department. I cannot thank you enough for your support, and if you have not been in the library because you don't think we have something for you, we have something for every single one of you, and if I don't, I will give you $5 out of my own pocket. Libraries are vital to your community, to democracy, to education, to health care, and thank you for your support. And if you have any questions, send them my way. One other thing, I would get in trouble. So when I started here 20 years ago, my mom, the wonderful Nancy Nash Cummings, said to me, the first person you meet is the town clerk. And I went and I met Bonnie, and let me just tell you, she was right. I don't even know if Bonnie's still here. She has provided the guidance, advice, sense of humor that I have needed. So thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you. Article 28, shall the voters appropriate $337 to Public Health Council of the Upper Valley to be used for continuing public health education for Norwich residents, particularly in the areas of substance abuse, elder care, oral health, emergency preparedness, and healthy living? Any representatives from the Public Health Council of the Upper Valley? Article 29, shall the voters appropriate $1,200 to Senior Solutions, an area agency on aging, to provide social services benefiting Norwich residents age 60 and older? Yes.
Hello, my name is Kevin Golden, and I'm here from Senior Solutions. Just wanted to say real quick, and I'll keep it brief. We're the Council on Aging for Southeastern Vermont.
Can you speak a little bit? Yeah.
We are the Council on Aging for Southeastern Vermont, and we're one of 5 such agencies. We're a nonprofit that's tasked with ensuring the dignity and quality of life for older adults here in Vermont, so that's anyone over the age of 60, as well as disabled adults a little younger than that, as well as their caregivers. And just a real quick, a couple of things about what we were up to here in Norwich last year. We operate a helpline that anyone can call, and I'll give everyone the number real quick. And this is for anyone in Windsor, Wyndham, Bennington, or Orange. And it's 802-885-2669. I'll say it one more time. 802-885-2669. And so anyone who is a caregiver to someone who has dementia, or to an older adult, or who is themselves an older adult, or has a neighbor that they're worried about, can call that number. And we keep a suite of resources on hand, government programs that we can help them enroll in, as well as a laundry list of partners, government and private, that can help them get the things that they need to age in place in their own home with a degree of dignity. And just real quick, specific to our request this year, there are 2 things that I wanted to point out. One is the information and assistance line. We did about 3,815 of those calls last year. So those are people calling for everything from Medicare to assistance keeping their fuel coming in, their lights turned on, getting an assistive device that will allow them to communicate with their family through the phone, or things of that nature. And so we received 61 calls last year from 45 individuals over the age of 60 here in Norwich. And we also helped to deliver 1,432 meals to 16 different individuals here in Norwich. We also operate case management services, so this is where we send social workers and case managers out into people's homes. And sorry, give me just one second. This is my first one, so thank you for having me. Here we go. 16 clients here in Norwich, and also 20 individuals called about Medicare, so that's a very popular service. Every fall, course, is open enrollment, and anyone who's over the age of 60 in Windsor, Wyndham, and a little bit of Orange and a little bit of Bennington can give us a call and ask us about anything from, you know, I got a phone call, I received this in the mail, or I'm looking to change plans, or I'm about to retire, what can you do for me? And we just walk them through the process. So, any questions at all, I'm happy to answer them.
Great. I think we might save the questions for the end, if that's okay. Will you hold your question? Thank you. And thanks so much. And that number again, if you didn't happen to catch, is 802-885-2669 for Senior Solutions. And like I said, we will have some time at the end for questions for any of the organizations that are here. So Article 30, I believe we're on. Shall the voters appropriate $3,750 to Southeastern Vermont Community Action to be used for emergency needs, referral to, and assistance with assessing needed services, financial counseling, and food and nutrition education? Anybody here from the Southeastern Vermont Community Action? No. Okay. Article 31, shall the voters appropriate $2,000 to the Special Needs Support Center for the Upper Valley to help children and adults with special needs and their families meet their unique challenges through advocacy and program support? Yes.
Candace Briere, I'm with the Special Needs Support Center, and we provide advocacy for our families in the Upper Valley and beyond. We provide adult and children's after school and evening programs, social events, art lab, you know, anything that special needs participants need is basically what we do. And we're asking Norwich, it's level funding as it was last year for $2,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Article 32, shall the voters appropriate $6,000 to the family place to be used for general program support, such amount being reasonably necessary for the support of programs such as direct service through early intervention, child care payment assistance, healthy baby visits, reach up, welcome baby, parent education, play groups, and other services. The family place. Article 33, shall the voters appropriate $2,000 to the Upper Valley Trails Alliance to be used for trail planning and work? Sir.
Hi, Peter Griggs, Norwich, Dutton Hill Road. I'm on the Trail Committee in Norwich, and we do support and work with the Upper Valley Trails Alliance. They're a great group. This is a great deal. The amount of services that they provide and the tools that they have available for folks to borrow is a tremendous asset for this town.
Thank you. Article 34, shall the voters appropriate $18,500 to the Visiting Nurse Association and Hospice of Vermont, New Hampshire to help support the home health, maternal and child health, and hospice care provided in patients' homes and in community settings? Visiting Nurse Association and Hospice care. Article 35, shall the voters appropriate $5,300 to the White River Council on Aging to be used for home-delivered meals, transport, and social services? White River Council on Aging. Article 36, shall the voters appropriate $2,500 to Windsor County Mentors to be used for mentoring youth? Anybody here from Windsor County Mentors? Article 37, shall the voters appropriate $2,500 to WISE, Women's Information Service, to be used to support WISE's crisis intervention and support services and prevention education? WISE? People from WISE. Article 38, shall the voters appropriate $3,000 to Youth in Action to be used for operating expenses that support our community service efforts? Youth in Action, our final organization. Does anyone have any comments or questions for the presenters, or any comments or questions about any of these articles at all? Now is the time. Yes, do you want to go to the microphone?
Yes, I was too slow on Article, I believe, 19 for this funding for CATV, which has been invaluable throughout the pandemic and now after. So I want to speak for continuing this funding. It's very little money for a tremendous service, and thank you directly to the folks who stick it out late. And then also thank you to our moderator for stepping in. Thank you.
I believe there was another question, comment? Yes.
Watson, and I am the Norwich community nurse, and many people ask me if the median age group that we treat is just the elderly population, 70s, 80s, that are trying to age in their home with dignity. And the answer to that is the median age group for the Norwich community nurse is age 62. So it shows you how many people we actually treat. The second thing I wanted to address was Kevin from Senior
If we could,
Solutions.
everybody, sorry, we still have speakers in the back. Thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
Kevin from Senior Solutions,
Yes.
I wanted to tell him he should be asking for a lot more. Come on up, Kevin. He should be asking for a lot more than $1,200. I find as the Norwich community nurse that social services are much needed in this community. I am a nurse, and I can provide lots of care and assessments and filling the gaps and bridging, you know, the hospitalizations to our community to help people succeed in their discharge plan. But people like Kevin's group, they're social workers, and they can actually help people that are having financial needs, people that need to apply for Medicaid. I get lots of calls. People need help with Medicare. And Kevin, I refer them to your group because we need social workers. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. And then there was one other thing. Article 34. So VNH is asking for $18,500, and I know that that's what they asked last year as well. But many times when I make a referral to the visiting nurses, I am told that they do not have enough help, and so they're not providing the services that I'm requesting. It's been difficult. Beata here in Norwich has been really good. Even though they're short of staff, they try to fill those gaps. And so I guess I'm a little puzzled as to why VNH is asking for so much money from us. And I would just like an answer, but nobody's here. So,
Right.
So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And I believe we can't get a response because we don't have anybody here. But okay, as far as I could tell, that is ending the articles portion of the evening, but there is more, possibly more, and that is other business. Does anyone have any other business to bring up tonight?
Hi, Cheryl Lindbergh, one last time. So there is a reappraisal firm that will be starting a reappraisal in our town shortly, and they have asked to come to a public meeting in the near future, perhaps even in March, to do a presentation and introduce themselves to the people of the town. And regardless of how things vote, this will still occur, and there will be an opportunity for people, hopefully more than once, to meet in person, excuse me, with the reappraisal firm KRT Appraisal. And I just wanted to let the people of the town that are here and listening at home about the upcoming process. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other business? All right, well, seeing none, I believe that we can have a motion to adjourn temporarily. It'd be actually a motion to recess because town meeting moves into tomorrow morning where we start to actually vote on the Australian ballot. So I guess, yes, is there a motion to adjourn? And I don't believe we even need a second under the Roberts rules that I've been studying for weeks. Anyway, so we are going to recess until tomorrow morning, and I want to thank everybody. Thank the Select Board, the school district, and you all for being here. Thank you.
No. No. You're letting the fishes run alone. Okay? No, it's all good. Thank you. Thank you.